Welcome, everybody, to the Out of Home Insider Show, a podcast like no other, hosted by the one and only Tim Rowe. Get ready to have some knowledge dropped on you and to be entertained, because nothing's more valuable than food for your brain. So sit back, relax, we're about to dive in as the best industry podcast is about to begin.
Welcome to Out of Home Insider, the loudest voice in out of home. It's funny, a lot of people stop and ask me, they say, Tim, what's that mean? What does it mean to be the loudest voice in out of home? A lot of folks assume it has something to do with being louder than other industry trade coverage. It actually has nothing to do with anyone other than the community that is out of home. Whether you're a big operation, a small operation, have unique marketing insights, or a ton of out-of-home expertise, this is a platform to help the community grow, the community to learn. So I invite you to subscribe, follow, share. Please do all those things that help the community of out-of-home grow through this podcast, through the amazing guests that we have. It's all about democratization. And that's one of the reasons I'm most excited to be a part of the team at OneScreen.ai, where we're bringing buyers and sellers together to help brands win. If you want to learn more about what we're doing at OneScreen, visit onescreen.ai. Without further ado, let's go.
Welcome, everybody, to the Out of Home Insider Show, a podcast like no other, hosted by the one and only Tim Rowe. Get ready to have some knowledge dropped on you and to be entertained, because nothing's more valuable than food for your brain. So sit back, relax, we're about to dive in as the best industry podcast is about to begin.
I've been on it for quite a while of like, I hate the word vendor, I think we should find a way to move away from the word vendor. I think vendor makes it sound like you're selling hot dogs at Wrigley Field, and which, who doesn't love a hot dog at Wrigley Field, but that's not what the relationship is, vendor feels transactional, right? I've got a thing, you need a thing, here's money. That's not what this should be, right? And I think we get bogged down in that a lot. And I think you're starting to see, it's been interesting to me to see people move back and forth more often, right? So you have people, really great, talented people like Lena out here in LA, who she was at Kinetic, and then she went to the vendor side, and then she went back to agency, and now she's back to the, I just use the word vendor, back to the operator side, and I think we're seeing that more and more, right? And I think that just speaks to, there is a lot of fluidity. And I think that agencies, it's interesting on this side of seeing, as I'm interacting with more agencies, obviously more agency people, and they'll send something proactive, and the response is like, this is great, thanks so much. If the client ever asks for this, we'll send it to them. And it's like, right, okay, well then it's not proactive, and I always felt like, which, no fault to their own, they're all busy, and I always felt like at an agency, I worked with some really smart people like David Krupp and Mike Cooper, who very much were of the mindset of as an agency, we ourselves need to increase our revenue. Mm-hmm. And we need to do that from a proactive standpoint. And I think, and I think that comes with a lot of sort of transparency. I think agency leaders should be transparent and directional with their staff in terms of having those conversations. I think one of my first experiences with that was I was working on Discover Card at Kinetic, and with David Krupp and Miriam Milkowski and a lot of great people. And Discover Card had just signed on to be the official sponsor of the Orange Bowl or something, whatever year that was, 08, 09, we're talking 10 years ago, right? And I remember seeing that kind of an article, a press release or something, and I kind of was like, well, that's interesting. The Orange Bowl is a pretty big deal. Yeah. And so, we just sort of reached out to the client and just said, hey, what are you doing to support the fact that you just sponsored the Orange Bowl? And she was like, oh, I don't know, nothing really. And it was so we put together a proactive, super simple, some aerial banners, some digital bulletins with a countdown clock, whatever. And they loved it. Super small buy. But I remember very specifically, David Krupp was like, because you did that, because you saw that and reached out, you brought the company, X amount more revenue. Mm. And it was an interesting moment of being like, well, that's interesting, and well, that's pretty cool. And so I think, at the agencies, like we should always be having a business development, a growth oriented mindset. And I'm sure that it's always there. It just has to make sure that it's kind of trickled down. So to that end, now in my role now, again, it's a business development role. I don't necessarily, perhaps because I moved from running, an agency in LA to now, I came over to Mahlmann as straight into CRO role and then president. So, to admittedly, I was never the boots on the ground sales guy. And I remember when I moved from agency to sales, I was talking to one of the happy hours, a certain rep, kind of a cynical guy, nice guy. But I remember him saying to me, yeah, good luck adjusting to people never returning your emails or your phone calls. And I just was like, well, I've been getting that on the agency side my whole career. We send a plan to the planning team and they don't reply. They don't say thank you. We send something to the client and they don't reply. It's we're all dealing with the same things. And I think it's kind of we spend a lot of times talking about the perceptions of how our jobs and our lives and our companies are different. And I think we need to spend more time talking about, we're all really pretty much the same,
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, I think it makes perfect sense. And so outside of the podcast, and right now I'm just recording for posterity's sake, so I can go back and go through and find a really nice list of questions. Right. So the podcast, I started the podcast when I was at Adams and, got furloughed because of COVID and position was eliminated, but ultimately have ended up at a really exciting tech startup in out of home. And we just get to collaborate with people because we're not an agency. We're truly building a two-sided marketplace so that we can help with the discovery component and show brands kind of what's possible and then introduce them to the right people, right? Bring in agencies that make the most sense for the client or show them, different types of inventory. And we've gotten through that. We've gotten to collaborate with a lot of people already in just, a few short months. Do you think that from a collaboration standpoint, I'll ask it the way that I'm really trying to ask it. You got OAAA and Geopath seemingly getting divorced right now. Right. There's clearly this fractured thing a week before the conference. Who has to take the lead on this? Just getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I can see that. I don't necessarily think of it. I think it's an overstatement to say they're going to divorce. I think that they do need to align on some messaging. Yeah. I think the OAAA, the measurement standard, I think there's something to be said for, it would have been a whole lot cooler if it was a OAAA and Geopath, we collaborate, we came together. I think the OAAA is probably have seen moments of it going through a little bit of a evolution. I think going from Nancy was great, but she approached it. I think it was very much like a administrative, a lobbying, and advocate. And I think Anna has taken it in the direction of innovation and what should we be doing and how can we better sort of elevate out of home as a whole. Mm-hmm. So I think, and I've had a couple text messages and things about, and comments and questions about what I think of the new measurement standards. And I think I'm not going to focus too much on the, likelihood to see versus opportunity to see. I think the point that I think OAAA is trying to make is I've been in the room enough times through my agency career to see firsthand the way clients and the data guys at agencies discuss and think about out of home and the media mix modeling. And time again, I've heard clients talk about, we rely heavily on media mix modeling, but then out of home never really performs well. And so then, then we make a decision of whether we're going to include out of home or not. And it's kind of so we're talking about data. We're talking about the use of data up until the point where the data doesn't help us, in which case we don't want to talk about the data. We want to talk about the creative, we want to talk about this. And I've always said it's we need to be able to think about how do we, it's almost like as an industry, we're talking about different things. Like it depends on what lever we want to pull. Like, is it about consumer engagement? Is it about proximity to retail? Is it about, mass awareness, low CPM? Is it about data attribution? Is it about great big gay creative? And there's nothing more beautiful than a billboard. Which is it? Well, of course, it's all of it. It's all that. And what we have to do is sort of like, if we go down a path of talking to a client about creative, and they put up a campaign and the creative sucks, well, does that mean the campaign sucks? Well, of course not, right? And vice versa. So if we talk about, a client who wants to put up a great creative in Times Square, well, that's not really about data. I mean, right? That's about creative, and that's about big, and that's about wow. So we keep trying to find the way to talk about all of the things while still being able to talk about specific things sort of in like acceleration. So my point to that is, I think that the OAAA's point, the most important point of kind of their, measurement guideline discussion is we have to keep navigating how we fix that media mix modeling, our data discussion. And you can have all the data in the world, but if you show it to a client and then they doubt it or they think it's bullshit, well, then what difference does it make? What difference does it make if we have 1 million impressions if the client doesn't believe it versus if it's 890,000 and the client does believe it?
Yeah.
Right? Which would you rather have? Right?
The one the client believes. If it's likely to encourage them to buy.
Right. The one that's going to actually make the impact is the one that resonates and that they believe and that plays well with others. We have to stop talking about like, this is our sandbox, and I think I've seen, I think maybe on your podcast, perhaps Laramie talked about this.
Yes, he did.
Right.
Yep.
Like really great, really smart. And it's totally spot on of like, yes, of course we can talk about our attributes and the great things about outdoor without shitting on like TV or radio or, whatever, if anybody listens to radio anymore, but like, we can talk about ourselves and how we marry with everything else. And I think there are a lot of people in the industry who are doing that well. But I don't think we're quite, there and unified. And so again, it comes back to the data guys at the agencies, at the client, at the media mix modeling of like, they're the ones who are sitting there and saying, okay, yes, we should buy this many TOPs of outdoor at, I believe in it. Great. They're the ones checking the box to say, we agree and move forward. And it's stuff that, when I was at Rapport, I try to make headway with, people like Initiative. Mike Cooper did a great job also with like and Initiative to make headway. And, it just kept being kind of a circular conversation. And, I don't know, hopefully we can get there, but to me, that's the ultimate, unfortunately, the old school days of, of relying solely on the charms and wit of a sales guy, that's never going to go away. People are always going to want to give their business to people they like and trust. That's great. They should. But we have to accelerate the smart piece of that too. I'm stealing I think it was an old, again, I steal this all the time. I think it was an old David Kreplin. He just basically was like, he kind of said people want to do business with people that they want to get a beer with. And I've sort of taken that as like my mantra as I've hired and brought in talent and cultivated talent is just smart people want to work with smart people they like and they trust. That's whether it's a plumber, an accountant, a guy selling billboards, it's all the same.
There's I can't recall what book it's from. Maybe it was in Freakonomics actually. And it talked about doctors that get sued most frequently for malpractice score the lowest on bedside manner. And the doctors that get sued the least score the highest. But for the most part, the ones with the worst bedside manner are technically the most proficient doctors, but people sue them because they don't like them. Not because they did the right? So the doctors most likely to get sued are the ones with bad bedside manner, regardless of technical?
That's really, that's really interesting. I mean, I probably would say, I mean, across the board, if you're working in sales and nobody likes you as a human, well, you probably should be doing something else.
Might be time to change careers.
Might be time to change careers. But at the same time, the natures of things is like, I reached a certain moment of my career where like, I don't like some people don't like me. I sleep okay.
Right.
It just as long as, it's a whole lot more people like me than don't, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How has it been adjusting to, running the sales side of the sales side?
I've learned a ton. Like, I think the two things I probably would say, again, from a sales perspective, I don't know that I've seen that different. I think the two things I've seen different, one, being on the operator side and like communicating with the property owners and the developers, like that's been an eye-opening experience. Like I remember my first kind of meeting to try to convince a property owner, to do like some barricades or something. And that's the other interesting thing too. I probably shouldn't say, but on the buying side, I hated barricades. They always were more complicated than they're worth. And now on the sales side, I see how much interest other agencies have. And I'm like, great, so that's part of it too. My personal preference and my eye for what inventory I liked. Well, yes, I'm allowed to have that thought. And I think as we bring on new property or evaluate, I do think, okay, is this something, first I ask myself and, is this something I like and I want to stand behind? And the second I ask the sales team, like collaborative, like, do you like this? What do you think? How many times can you sell this? If the answer isn't, a certain threshold that I want, well, then that's it. Forget it. Like, I just think inherently people don't want to do what they don't want to do. And so if you make somebody sell a piece of inventory that they don't believe in, well, they're not going to sell it. And so what's the point? But to your question, so I remember going into like a property owner developer and talking about it from a media standpoint. We were talking about the barricades and I kind of was like, in the middle of the meeting, I kind of was like, oh, and would be great too is like in the months that go unsold, let's put up like art. Let's put art on the wall. And so we're creating public spaces of art. And I was going on and on about how important art is to life. And the guy looked at me and he said, well, how often do you expect it's going to be unsold? And I was like, well, not much. And then he's like, well, I don't want it to be unsold at all. And I'm like, well, sure, of course it's going to be unsold some months. You're not going to get 100% occupancy. And then he was like, I just met with somebody yesterday who promised me that. And I'm like, and so it was a funny, like, obviously, like, we can't just be this, like, nobody's going to be 100% occupancy. Like, we can't just be this race to the bottom. And, but also it was like this thing of like, right, okay, the property owners, the money guys, how much money are you going to bring me? What's going to be my revenue? What's going to be my profit? Like, they don't care about grandiose. They don't care about programmatic. They don't know what that is. They don't care about that stuff. They don't care about, integrating public art onto the barricade. That's not their bag, So the learning process of like, it is a reminder of like, at the root, as much as we talk about, again, data, impressions, and creative, it's a real estate business, and it's evaluating a piece of real estate. Is that a good location? Is that where it should be? I think at least, a small guy like us, where we have like 100 locations, clear channel out front, like, but even then, they're real estate guys. They're evaluating, is that where we, should, can, and will put up a billboard, put a barricade, put a whatever. So that's been a huge learning experience. And, not to mention the permitting processes and, a lot of that stuff. But more so, I think my adjustment has been like small business. So I've always been at, I was at Starcom, I was at Kinetic, I was at Rapport. Like I've always been part of, Publicis, WPP, IPG, like corporate, the dirty work, the HR, the finance. There was always somebody else there doing that. And we had there's a lot of ways working for big corporate is, beneficial. There's a lot of ways that, I was over it. So to go from, rapport, where I'm managing probably 25 maybe people at one point in LA, and like layers of personnel and staff, to going to Mahlmann, we had like 5 people, and which is great in a lot of ways, but then it's been just adjustment. It's not a complaint. It's just a moment of adjustment, right? It's as simple as like, I go to the fridge to get a bottle of water and we're out, and I'm like, well, who's supposed to order more water? And they're like, if you want more water, go buy more water. And I'm like, right, of course. It's like,
Sure.
It's stuff like that. And then, and I think from the standpoint of managing people, it's, just staying true to the way I've always, managed people. And, it's still a people business, whether it's 20 people or 5, right? And so it's just the little things of like, and then now, again, being a small business owner, and, I have a lot to learn about that. Like, I'm sitting down with our bookkeeper and she's talking about, taxes, this and that. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna have to explain this to me probably 3 more times before I get it,
That's cool. It's cool to go through, like, so working on one screen. This is my first startup. I've always been like, kind of work for a big company. And what I found is like, startup is perfect for me. And like, that's my kind of tempo, is gritty, like being in the dirt, like breaking things and figuring stuff out on your own. So totally appreciate that. I've tried to start like my own little side gig here and there over the years, and now I'm just learning so much. Like, oh, this is what it means to run a business.
Right.
I wasn't doing any of those things. I had no idea that I think people take that for granted. Like, it's not easy to do. Like you're making all these things available for us to buy, and there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah, like, and it's, there are a lot of ways. Believe me, I'm not complaining. There are a lot of great ways of like, being kind of the person, to collaborate. Our chief operating officer, Mike Cook, he's been with Mahlmann for a long time, and we collaborate well, and just sort of like having a conversation of like, okay, well, everything from, again, like, our vacation policies to our like, health insurance providers and all that stuff, but also to, okay, well, this inventory is available. Like, should we acquire it? Like, it runs the gamut, and like, and setting our operating budget and all that stuff, I think, to me, is just like, it's just fascinating, it really is. And I think the funny thing is, I was saying this to somebody, like, I bumped into a guy on the street few months ago, 6 months ago. And he was at Initiative when I was at Rapport, and like, and now he went to sales, and then, so we were just catching up, and he kind of had a statement of like, yeah, like, I should have done this a long time ago. I should have left. And I think that's, that's his truth, and that's valid. But from my standpoint, I'm like, this is exactly how, like, I don't think I could be doing this now if I wasn't, if I hadn't been surrounded by great, people in the past, and, and if I didn't have, 18 years or whatever it is at agencies, like, it's almost literally, Tim, on a daily level, there's a moment where something comes up or something, and I have a thought of like, okay, well, let's see, something like this came up 5 years ago, and here's how I did that. Okay, well, that didn't go that way I should. Well, here's how I would do different, and like, like in the moment, sort of, or more often than not, of course, it's like, oh, well, yeah, well, based off this, this, and this, well, here's what we should do. And I think, and just, again, more so relying on the process that I've taken that got me, I probably ask, what do you think, is probably the question I ask the most. It's like, I think leaders get in trouble if they just think that, they can go in a room and start to bark and tell everybody what to do. And and I think that, yes, there's a balance there of like, if the boss is constantly saying, it's different than saying, like, I've had bosses who are like, well, I don't know what to do. And it's like, that's not really what the saying is. The saying is like, okay, well, I think I have an idea, but I want, you guys input, I want to empower you to be part of the solution. Again, what do you think? Like, I know what I think, but I want to know what you guys think. And again, that's stuff that I just crafted and evolved. Like a thing that some staff of mine at Rapport used to hear me say all the time is like, yeah, I have a vision. Of course I have a vision, but every leader should, but then you edit it with some collaboration and you implement with consensus. We just had I can't go into too much detail, I guess, but we just had a thing come up of a potential new build. And I sort of set in my mind, I'm kind of like a deadline oriented. Like if you don't set sort of a potential end date, well, then it's just going to drag. Right. And so you just sort of say, all right, yes, I want to do that. I want to do it by this date. So like, that's a goal. So 2 people, development guy, operations guy, like operations guy, well, what do you need from him to be able to have it ready in time for you to do your part, and again, that's all like, yes, there's nuances to that from an outdoor standpoint. And I don't know the answer to that, but the operations guy and the development guy knows that. What I know is if we get this done by this date, well, that's going to be a really good thing. And then to sort of manage the project in between, and so that's stuff that, again, that's all stuff that I think that's the process that I learned over, again, agency life. So those are little ways that it's not a ton different, what I mean? It's like, that is specifically talking about, again, putting up a new structure, getting a new permit, whatever it may be. And that's the same as if a client comes and says, okay, I really want, a media plan or, give us a POV on blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of like get everyone in a room, a new client pitch. When I was at the agency, we had a new client pitch that they like, it was an auto company. They sent out an RFP and, and it just was, we got everyone in the room and just was like, okay, you guys work on this section, you guys this section, you guys this section, let's get together on this date and then, allow time to edit. And, all that stuff is like, for me, it's fun to get shit done,
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. The last couple of weeks have been very busy, which is awesome. And we've shipped a lot in like terms of like the things that drive the revenue. But then like in the back of my head, from a marketing standpoint, I'm like, I'm so far behind on marketing stuff and it's driving me crazy. Like,
yeah.
Because I need to ship stuff. Like I need tangible finished products to feel like, okay, I'm doing my job. How do you, this is just me asking from like a mentorship. How do you manage like that stress of when you have things, but there are other things that are a higher priority? Is it like, do you give yourself permission? Is it like an active exercise? Like, do you have any kind of coping management things for that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, that's always the thing, right? Is when you get to a moment of like conflicting priorities or, there's more things to do and there's time to do it. That's all like, yeah, that's some deep stuff that I think your word permissions is a good one. I think that there's a few sort of things that sort of hover, and maybe there's a Venn diagram that they all intersect. But one of them is, done well is better than like not done. Like, or maybe a different way to phrase that is like, done on time and done well is better than done late and great, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. Again, I had some staff, great staff member who we talked a lot about. She got into like perfection paralysis of like, she would consistently be late on a plan delivery. And every plan was like the best plan she's ever done. But I'm like, yeah, I know that, but you got it like a day late. Like, and like we talked about, like she would spend like 80% of her time like thinking about the plan and then 20% doing. And that's noble, as long as it's done on time, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's that. I think there's also a control where you can control sort of a thing, right? And stay in your lane. These are all kind of buzzy catchphrases, but I do think they have meaning. I read great book I reference all the time, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. He's talks a lot about, I'll send you a copy. He talks a lot about the Stoic philosophers and how how to integrate that into business and, stay present, control what you can control, and sort of take every moment within the moment while acknowledging that every moment is going to build. Prepare for what could be here, but allow yourself to kind of deviate along the way while still knowing when you're going to go, right? So, but the day-to-day of I'm trying to finish something and then a guy calls and I'm like, oh crap, I'm supposed to call him back. I don't know, there's not always a magic bullet for that. It's just about staying calm in the moment and just sort of being able to, get it done. There is, I think it's called the Eisenhower principle, maybe, where it's important and urgent, important, not urgent, not important.
Okay.
I forgot the other quadrant, something like that. And I think, that's just old school stuff, right? Make a list and check it off. Again, so much that I learned from other people along the way. There was a gal I worked with in Chicago, Connecticut, and she made her to-do list. First thing she did in the morning, she made her to-do list. And she said, I'm going to do these 5 things before I take a break for lunch. And then when I come back from lunch, I'm going to do these 4 things. Anything that comes up within the day, it can wait, and just a very regimented, that works really well for her. And other people they're kind of I think I've had other staff who worked for me who admittedly, the agency, the client would say, every time we send an email, we expect an email back within the hour with either an answer or at least a reply to say, we're working on it. It's okay, that's a bit much, but sure, I guess, and just kind of navigating that sort of a, process with that agency person and kind of saying, look, what do we think? What's doable? Can we at least just send the, yep, received. I'll get you an answer by tomorrow. I think it's also about managing expectations. In addition to the word vendor, I'd also like to ban the word ASAP, right? ASAP doesn't really
mean it. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's kind of been bastardized a little bit. It doesn't really mean
I literally have said clients in my mind, if I say, I'll get you ASAP.
Yeah.
That for me, that might be
next year.
Right. What's possible? Well, right. Someday. Does someday work? Someday's good. But I've had clients, and that was on me. Again, I would say to a client, I'll get this to you ASAP. 2 hours later, do you have it yet? I'm okay.
We need a chart, what ASAP means.
Right. And ASAP. Well, that doesn't really mean anything, right? So it's, yes, I can work on this. I will get this to you in 2 hours. I'll get this to you in 2 days. I'll get this to you on Wednesday. I will buy a hamburger today and pay for you Tuesday, or whatever that old Popeyes line is.
Yeah. So we will ban the word vendor ASAP.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds about right. As soon as possible. And again, the last thing is just, if everything is urgent, well, then nothing is urgent, right?
I couldn't agree.
If everything is now, well, that's not real, right? So if you want everything now, well, then some of it's going to be late. Mm-hmm. Well, so then just agree to have it late, which means I'll get it to you tomorrow.
Right. Which means it's on time if we set the right expectation.
Right, which means it's on time. Right, ASAP.
Right. Glyn, want to be respectful of your time. I see we ran over a couple minutes. Is there anything that you want to talk about, or any initiatives that Mahlmann has, or anything that's like big pressing on your agenda? Because that's ultimately the show is a platform for the industry. So anything that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I think Mahlmann is at an interesting moment. Like, so it's a 30-year-old company. It was run by Richard Mahlmann, hence the name of the company. And, he's a bit of a legend in the industry, especially on the West Coast. And the company was doing really, really well and very successful. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, he sort of fell ill, and the company just sort of they sort of lost their bearing. For no fault of anybody in particular, right? It's just that life, right? And I think what they got caught up in is if you're not moving forward, then you're drifting backward, right? And so there are ways that, I've felt that, the company has had great people in their, currently at the company and in the past. And so the ways that I had felt that, well, me coming in as kind of an outsider, only with the company for a couple of years, is it fair, right? Is it appropriate for me to be the person to then start to run it? But then at the same time, I've kind of felt, well, that's exactly what makes it, right? Like a company can be like a house. Like it's a 30-year-old company, just like a 30-year-old house. There can be great bones and then just some wobbly pieces, and you just need somebody to come in and kind of tweak it and reconfigure it. And so we're at this moment of sort of, evolution, right? And what do we want to be and who are we? And we went from about 50 locations across 3 or 4 markets when I started to now, either sort of owning or repping about 150 locations across 12 markets. And I think that's just sheer, again, just sort of putting some new energy behind it and sort of looking at where we want to be. And some of that, yes, and admittedly, a lot of that has been accelerating our sort of rep model, our rep business. It's not a new model, of course, but it's just sort of elevating that, taking that in a different direction, and kind of looking at everything that we rep, everything that we sell. There's at least some level of exclusivity. And I remember in particular, my first kind of road show there. It was one of these things. I went to New York, 10 meetings in 3 days kind of a thing. And, one of our walls, our favorite wall in San Francisco, I put it up on the screen. We're talking about it with the agency, whatever. And an agency buyer said, "That's not your wall." And we were like, well, yeah, I mean, we sell, we rep it, and she said, "I've seen that wall from 4 other people in the last 2 weeks. Like, if the rest of your stuff is like this, I'm out of here." And, and of course I was like, okay, lady, like, give me a break. But
right. One, don't be a jerk.
Well, I'm not gonna, yeah, but more so, sure. She's right. More so, like, she definitely was right. I was like, what are we doing? What is this? Like, and is this what I want to do? Is this again, staying true to myself as a buyer? I never liked that model. Like, I wouldn't have said that in particular, but maybe I would have thought that, if somebody was like, and similarly, I never liked the model. Everyone's doing their own thing. I respect all that, but I never liked the model of somebody coming in and they've got 20 different things going on that are all not related. And, everybody's working hard, everybody's trying to make a buck, but I think it just never really resonated. And so it just was a moment of me coming out of that. I just sort of like, where do I want this company to go? Like the whole flight home from New York back to LA, I just wrote pages and pages of notes of like, what do we want this company to be? What do we want to go with it? What do we want to do? And I sort of, and again, to sort of rip off some of my sort of repetitive comments, like, sort of a blue sky mentality, right? On a normal thought process, normal approach to things, we often start with what can we do, right? That's sometimes our first thing. Well, if you start the sort of decision-making process with what can we do, well, you've already put a ceiling on yourself versus like, there are tons of things that I'm doing all the time that before I did it, I didn't know if I could do it or not, but I'm going to do it anyway, or I'm going to try to, or I'm going to invite people to help me do it. So we have to change the mentality from what can we do to then, so what should we do? What should we do? Who should we be? Where should we go? What should we add? Like, start with that. And then, of course, there's a level of, okay, well, let's take that list of what we should do. And yes, let's start to think about what can we do? And more so, how can we do that? I want that wall that we talked about. I want exclusivity on that. Okay, how do we do that? And how much time is going to cost? How much, whatever, resources? And, and you just sort of make that a priority and make that a goal. And then, and we did it. We have exclusivity on that wall in particular. And so now we are able to say, yes, that's our wall. And again, that's a level of perseverance of, years at agency. And the number of times that I had a meeting with a client who was like, he'd say, let me save you some time. We're never going to buy outdoor, and chip away and chip away and chip away. And then, he comes up to me and he's like, okay, send me a plan for like July, August, September. And it's like, so again, even on the agency level, right? That's sales. You're selling him on outdoor over and over and over again. I wasn't talking about a specific board or whatever. It's about the concept of outdoor. And then they did, in that instance, 10 years ago, whatever it was, they did like the guy who had told me no 5 times. Well, he did like $1 million buy, and like, it's the same thing,
Yeah. No, I love that framework of starting with what should we do versus what can, right? Because you're right. Can is very limiting. It's what can I currently do today? What am I capable of today? And that's the high watermark.
Right.
Versus like, if I could just do anything and I had all the resources and all the skills and all the talent and the laws of physics didn't apply. Right. What should you do?
What should you do? What do you want to do? And how do you make that happen? What's realistic? Some self-editing is necessary, like every new opportunity that comes across my desk to acquire whatever, I'm like, well, that looks good. Let's do it. It's like, okay. Hold on. Like
I could totally sell that. I know someone today who would buy that.
Right. Right. And it's like, and just surrounding yourself with the people of like, well, hold on. Like, let's, if we do that, well, then we can't do that, and that. And it's like, fine. You can't do anything. You can't do everything. Right. So there's some self-edit.
Because I'm that way. Like I see the possibility in everything. That's why I'm so grateful for having my CEO and CRO to be like, okay, cool, but like let's turn it upside. Right, they see things differently. Let's turn it upside down. Let's actually see like, and some things will work, and that some things then I get even more excited about. Like, oh wow, I didn't even think about that. And others I'm like, oh yeah, there's probably a better idea we could go with.
Yeah, and that's a great. Yeah, that's the power of collaboration. That's the power of the words, what do you think? And just some and surrounding yourself with the right people, smart, likable, trustworthy people that you want to work with, and you want to sort of bounce ideas off each other. And, if you ask a different model too, not to keep going on and on, but ask the 3 people, 3, 4 people, whatever it is, okay, well, here's the problem. All of you come in with 5 bullet points of how to solve this problem, and then all bring them in. If you ask 3 people to bring in 5 bullet points of how to solve a problem, the 3 people are probably going to have probably 5 of those 15 are going to be the same. Mm-hmm. They're going to all have kind of the same, write down the same thing. Great. Well, that's your base. And then it's going to be, okay, well, I like half of your idea and half of your idea. Well, let's talk about, can we blend those two, and all about collaboration, all about, putting your energy force around communication and the people that you work with, and you do that, you do it the right way. Well, then, you got nothing to lose, right? Skies above, blue skies ahead.
Amen to that. Amen.
All right, man.
Glyn, I really appreciate it. I'm going to go back, get a bunch of good questions. I'll get you a list, and then we'll put some time on the books to.
Or look, this was great. I mean, take a look at it, do some editing. If you feel like you know.
Yeah, we could be close.
Do some editing and see what you think. And if there's a couple more follow-up questions you want, then I'll wear the same outfit, and so we can like splice them together.
Deal.
All right.
Awesome.
All right,
Thanks so much. Have a good weekend. We'll see you.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Quarter century, I finally came to my senses. I finally got my hand up on the tinted Benz, kid. I see the world clear through my tinted lenses. With the dream and the drive, the possibilities endless. Now print that, send this all the way to Tokyo. Take a trip down south, down to Mexico. Next stop, Shanghai, the world-class trade show. First class all the way, cause that's how we roll. Yeah, call us the rock star businessman. Rockin' shows we handle business, man. We got our own future in the palm of our hands, cause divided